Welcome back to my channel. My name is Jeanette and I am a spirit within my vessel. I am connected to everything and everyone, and I am just on a level that's very peaceful, very happy. I know who I am. I know the truth. I know how to work with the energies. I'm very, very thankful for the gifts that my Father have given me. I'm also thankful for today, which today is a gift. And I'm very thankful to my Creator, always, every single moment of my life. I thank my ancestors, my spirit guides, my archangels, my ascended masters, my galactic family, my spirit animals, my deities, my fairies, my dragons. I love them all. My deities, I love you all. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. My loved ones, I love you all. Thank you for the love, the support, the guidance, the protection, the gifts. I can't explain exactly, but these gifts are remarkable. And once you tap into your gifts, these gifts are used for good. Then I use for some people do anyway, but I'm staying on the positive note. It's like I'm very thankful. And I'm going to start off again at the end of I was reading from the Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life, Volume 1 by Drunvalo Melchizedek. And I ended, let's see, I ended with the genetic keys were then opened to initiate through the Neeters who represented Osiris's chromosomes. But a problem developed from this way of representing their religion. They really don't always, hold on, they don't want me always to talk. I'm back. Please don't forget to share, like, and subscribe to my channel. And if this message is not for you, then it's not for you. Only take what resonates and leave the rest behind. Okay? Nobody's imposing anything on anyone. Do your research. Open up your minds. Expand your knowledge. And do not become judgmental of other people's teachings. But a problem developed from this way of representing their religion, especially as Upper and Lower Egypt again became more separated. Both Lower and Upper Egypt had 42 plus 2 gods or Neeters, more Neeters representing these stages. But Upper Egypt had images slightly different from those of Lower Egypt. The images had changed over time when the two countries were separated. When Means put the two countries together on as a single country called Egypt, in order to potentially correct the adopted of all these images. So now they had 84 plus 4 gods representing the same religious ideas. That was probably a big mistake because it got very confusing. For instance, in one area, they would take one of them, the Neeters, like Anubis, and say, this is God, with a big G. Another would say, Isis is God. And another area would claim Sekhmet to be their God. So then there was 88 different ideas of God in the country. They would say, my God is the God, and your God is wrong. It became very separated and occult, and after a while no one had an idea that there really was only one God. They didn't understand that the Tap Brotherhood was trying to tell them. From our American point of view, this would be like chromosome breakage. It was a mutation and it was not correct. Even with the help of the Tat Brotherhood, they just stood. They just couldn't get it right. And it got worse and worse. All the evidence I seen indicated that the Christian religion came directly out of the Egyptian religion. If you study both of them, they are paralleled in every single way except the Egyptians' understanding of God. The Christian religion came back later and totally discounted the Egyptian religion. Even though Egypt is the probable source of the origins of Christianity. The Christians saw the Egyptians as being a cult, and they were, but it was because their religious belief had become corrupted with the clear exception of 17 and a half years during the 18th dynasty. The rescue of human consciousness. Akhenaten's life. A brilliant flash of light. For a very short period of 17 and a half years, a brilliant flash of light appeared, then disappeared again. And the brilliant flash of light is what saved our spiritual lives. It began approximately 15,000 BC, when the worshiping and arguing over so many gods was prevalent. The ascended masters finally decided that something must be done. Finally, they chose a plan. Thought told me the following story. As the first step, they decided to bring in an actual Christ conscious being, in an actual Christ conscious body, so that we can put back into Akasha records the memory of what Christ consciousness was all about. It had been lost in the fall. The Christ conscious body would be much taller than those on the planet at the time. This would be an example for the earth people to see. That was the first part of the plan. It was very bold step, and they did it. The ascended masters had decided that the Christ consciousness person should become king of Egypt. In order to do this, they had to break all the rules, and I mean all of them. What they did was approach the king of that period, Amenhotep II, and asked him for a favor. Thoth simply walked into the room physically, went right up to him and said, "Look, I am Thoth," which I am sure was difficult for the king to believe. But by the time the Egyptians probably thought that all those neiters in their stories were mythical. Yet here's a real person standing there who was one of the neiters. Thoth said, "We have a serious problem here in Egypt, and I need your help." Thoth somehow got Amenhotep II to do something that no Egyptian king would ever do. Abton's son was about to become king, and Thoth said, "I want your son to not become king. I want to put an outside lineage onto the Egyptian throne." Amenhotep II agreed to it. It must probably came in glowing or levitating or something like that. But he did something to convince the king that it was necessary. Once they received the king's permission, they had to actually create the body, which was not easy. Creating the body of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. So how did they do this? They went to A and Taya, who were very old. No matter how you looked at it and said, "We would like you to have a baby." They had to go to someone who was immortal to get immortal genes because they have different chromosomes. Count 46 plus 2 instead of 44 plus 2. A and Taya agreed and they had a little baby. The baby was given to Amenhotep II to become the next king. So the little baby grew up and became king. He became Amenhotep III, who then made it. And I'm not sure if it was physically or interdimensionally. And I don't know who it was, but he would almost have had to mate with someone who had the higher chromosome levels. Anyway, their baby boy became known as Amenhotep IV, and the baby was the only one who had special plans for, who they had special plans for. That baby, Amenhotep IV, was a more popular name, which you know as Akhenaten. Meanwhile, A and Taya waited a generation and then had another baby. That baby was a girl whose name was Nefertiti. Nefertiti grew up with Akhenaten, and they married. They were really brothers and sisters because they had the same bloodline. The Osiris story is similar. Brother and sister marrying and becoming a new possibility in life. So there's two people grew up and became the king and queen of Egypt. The new rulership and the one God. 1 second. Okay. For a while, Amenhotep III and his son Akhenaten ruled the country together, two kings at the same time, again breaking the rules. Meanwhile, they built a brand new city called Tel El Armana in the exact center of Egypt. We still don't know how they got it in the exact center. Akhenaten put a stone there that says, "This is the center of the country. Today we could not have done it better from a satellite." It makes you wonder who these people were who could locate right down to the square inch, the centimeter of a country, hundreds of miles long. It's pretty amazing. They built an entire city out of white stones. It was beautiful. It was space age. Akhenaten and his father ruled the country simultaneously from two places for a while, from Thebes and from the Tell Amarna. The father resigned the throne while he was still alive, which again breaks the rules, and gave the country to Akhenaten, and who then became the first pharaoh of Egypt. There were no pharaohs before Akhenaten, only kings. Pharaoh means that which you will become. In other words, they were showing the people that they would literally become the future. Akhenaten and Nefertiti and their children were not exactly human. This tall figure is Akhenaten. I am going to talk about this picture for a moment. Akhenaten's main purpose was to break up all the occult religions and bring the country back to a single religion where they believed that there was simply one God. Just lower this for a second, sorry. At the same time, all the people were worshiping statues, so they were used to believing in things. Akhenaten had to give them something to see, to believe in, so he gave them the image of the sun as God, because this image was something that couldn't stick on their altar again. That's Akhenaten. There was another reason he gave them the image of the sun. He told them that the breath of life, the prana field, came from the sun. This is true in terms of third dimensional thinking. Through prana is really anywhere and everywhere. There are infinite amounts of it at any point. Since prana also comes from the sun, this image shows the sun rays coming down. And on two of the rays are little ants, which the rays are holding up to the nose of the breath, showing that eternal life is through the breath. Okay, I'm going to show you that picture. In this same picture, you also see the lotus, the national flower of Atlantis. It was the Nakals who brought the lotus to India. The Nakals are written about in Indian Sanskrits writings and are talked about even in modern times. They came along before Buddha and were there during Buddhist times. In Egypt, the lotus flower represented Atlantis. And in the picture, you see them out of the vases. Everyone knew that Atlantis was dead, but there was still paying homage to it by having the lotuses out of the vases. Notice that Akhenaten and the main figure has a long, skinny neck, skinny hands, and a high waist, wide thighs, and skinny legs. The unusual Egyptian explanation is that he had a disease and was deformed. Of course, so was Nefertiti and all her daughters. Eventually, they all had the same disease. I believe something very different. That's Akhenaten, Nefertiti, the sun, lotus flower. Oh, that's the truth and ducks. The truth and ducks, sorry. See? The reign of truth, which depicts a different genetics. Besides making the religious monotheistic again, Akhenaten also said, in this new religion, we are not going to have any more lying, no more untruthfulness. And we are going to change our art so that it reflects the total truth. So during the 18th dynasty, never before nor after there was totally unique art forms. The artist was instructed to sculpt or paint things just as their eyes saw it, like a photograph. So began the art that looked realistic instead of stylized. And it had been before. You see ducks that look like ducks, just like we see the modern arts. This is important to remember when you're looking at the art of the 18th dynasty, because that means that whatever you see is exactly what the artist saw. They were not allowed to lie. This issue about truth was taken to such an extreme that they were not even allowed to wear clothes, because wearing clothes was hiding and what was a form of lying. No one was allowed to wear clothes during the 18th dynasty except for ceremonial and other special purposes. This neater name is Mayat. That's a feather on top of her head. She became one of the most important leaders in this new religion because of her name, which relates as truth, truthfulness. She was important. She was the important issue in everything. Everything was to be absolutely truthful. And there was no distortion, no lies, so that everything could get back into focus. This was an important part of Akhenaten's teachings. This is the statue of Akhenaten in Cairo Museum. Akhenaten was 14 and a half feet tall, not counting his hairdress. When I stood next to this, the top of my head came up to the widest part of his hips. Nefertiti was 10 feet something. She was totally small for her race. The daughters were also very tall. This is according to thought. Hard evidence of this was recently come into official hands, and they don't know what to think about it. They found 2 caskets in Tel El Armana, Akhenaten City. This is Akhenaten. Mayat. The Mayat. One of the caskets had a flower of life attached directly over the head of the mummy inside, and the second casket held the bones of a 7-year-old boy, but he was 8 feet tall. The casket is still sitting in the basement of Cairo Museum at this moment. At least it probably is. It was only real proof so far of what these bodies looked like. From thought teachings, this statue was Akhenaten. It is exactly what he looked like, just as if you took a photograph of him. This is a burst of Nefertiti that was found in Tel El Armana. There is nothing left. There is almost nothing left of that city. At one point, the city was dismantled brick by brick and spread all over the world. The Egyptians did not want you to know that Akhenaten and Nefertiti had never lived. The only reason we do know is because they have buried something in rooms deep underneath the ground that earlier people didn't find. This bust was found. Many people think of Nefertiti as a very beautiful woman, but they don't realize that she was extremely tall and that her body was very unusual in certain ways. Figure 513 is a little known statue of Nefertiti found in the same room as the bust. She's not wearing clothes because they didn't believe in that at that time. She had a huge head, large ears, a long skinny neck, and a high waist. She also has a kind of bulging tummy. And if you could see the rest of her, she was skinny legs and wide thighs. Nefertiti in the nude. That's Nefertiti in the nude. This is Akhenaten. And Nefertiti. Two Nefertiti's. These are Nefertiti's daughters. This is a picture of Nefertiti's daughters. There are 2 of her daughters. Their skulls are enormous, and they have high waist, skinny calves, and huge ears. This is another one of her daughters. 515. I feel certain that this is exactly what she looked like. If you could see that her head from her neck, you could see its size. It was big. It's hard to see the size in these ears until you actually get right next to it. Another figure, another daughter younger than the last one's, little neck, huge skull extending back. This is an image of one of the daughters as a teenager. This is another figure, 518. You can see how big the head is relative to the body. These are her teenage daughters. This is the baby. Again, the skull goes way up and round. The ears are about half the size of the head. Physiologically, these bodies are vastly different from human bodies. There are all kinds of differences, brains differences, and other unusual things. For example, they have 2 hearts. The only reason we have 1 heart is because we have 1 sun. But these are Syrian beings. Actually, they are the members of the 32 beings who are sitting around the original flame, and their bodies are from the star Sirius. The Sirius sun system has 2 stars, Sirius A and Sirius B. In binary system, as are a vast majority of the star systems, and those systems' life forms have 2 hearts. There is only 1 sun life forms have 1 heart. If there are more stars than 2 in the system, there will be 2 hearts. King Tut and the other elongated skulls. This is King Tut, who took over directly after Akhenaten was disposed of. King Tut was only 18 years old when he became king. Nobody knows for sure where he came from. The slide says he was the son-in-law of Nefertiti and Akhenaten, married to their daughter. He was obviously part of this lineage, though his skull doesn't appear as big. But he does have the big ears. According to thought, King Tut was allowed to take over for only 1 year. He ruled during the transition of Akhenaten and the next phase. King Tut was in telepathic communications with Nefertiti while she ran the country through him for the 1 year she was hiding. This is the Museum of Lima. Just wanted to note that they have some pretty amazing skulls here. Peru is another place thoughts went to. They found these skulls in Peru just like those in Egypt. These large skulls were found in 3 areas of the world in and around Egypt, Peru, and Tibet. Nowhere else, at least that I know of. Remember, these are the primary areas where these beings went. This was one of my teachers who is now dead. His name is Kalu Rinpoche, a Tibetan Lama. I have many teachers, but I feel especially close to this one. I really love him a lot. Notice the shape of his skull. The memory of immortality. You might wonder if Akhenaten and others were immortal. Then why are they dead? I'll give you the definition of immortality from Melchizedek's point of view, which hopefully will help. Somebody else may have a different definition, but this is what we feel. Immortality has nothing to do with living the same forever, the body forever. You're going to live forever anyway. You have always been alive, and you always will be. But you might not be conscious during all that time. The definition from the point of view was to do with memory. When you become immortal, you reach the point of where your memory remains intact, and from there on. In other words, you are conscious from then on, with no unconsciousness coming in. It means you stay in the body as long as you want to, and when you when you want to leave it, you leave. Just wanted to show you pictures of the King Tut when he was young. the baby Akhenaten. This was the teacher he was talking about in this book, and the skulls in Peru. To have to stay in a single body forever would be a jailed or trapped, because it means you couldn't leave. There might be a reason for leaving the body, and you will eventually find that you want to be beyond wherever you are. This is the definition of eternal life. Simply put, you have continuous, unbroken memories. Back now to what happened after Akhenaten was dethroned. In order to let things get back into the old ways which they wanted to do, the country went into a transitional state. The people who became king and queens directly after him are almost comical. They let A and Tai take over the country. We have a long time lag here, and they became king and queen. King and queen. It's written in the records. They took over for around 30 years, and then they gave it to Seti, who became the first king of the 19th dynasty. He immediately changed everything back to the old way, erased everything, and called Akhenaten the same name they called Jesus, the criminal. He called him the worst king ever lived because of his teaching that was only one God. What really happened to Akhenaten? Most of Egypt hated Akhenaten except for a small group. The priesthood hated him most of all because Egyptians' religious beliefs were centered on the priest. They controlled the people, their way of life, and the economy. They became rich and were more powerful than anybody else. Then Akhenaten came along and said, "You don't need priests. God is within you. There is only one God, and you can access God from within your own self." The priests reacted to protect themselves and their vested interests. Also, Egypt had the most powerful military in the world, and when Akhenaten became pharaoh, they were chomping at the bit, ready to go out and take over the world. Akhenaten said no. He was complete pacifist and said, "Come back onto our soil. Do not attack anyone unless you are attacked." He made the military come back and sit by idly, and they didn't like that. So he had not only the priesthood, but the military against him. On top of that, the people themselves were into a little religions, and they loved worshiping their little gods. They didn't ultimately do them any good. It wouldn't give them where they needed to be according to the DNA plan of the universe, which was back home to God, to the one God. But nevertheless, they were really into what they were doing. When the people were forcefully told that they could no longer do certain religion acts, this caused a great animosity towards Akhenaten. It would be like our president saying, "Okay, there are no religions in the world, in the United States. They're just the president's religion." And if the president brought all the military back into America's soil with an isolationist point of view, we wouldn't be very popular. Neither was Akhenaten, but he knew that he had to do it no matter what, even if it meant his own death. He had to do it correct, the path that our collective DNA had encoded into the reality. In addition, he needed to put into the Akashic records the memory of the sacred purposes of Christ consciousness held. So what happened then? According to the accepted history of the priesthood and the military got together and gave Akhenaten a poison that killed him. According to thought, that is not exactly what happened, because they did something much more exotic. Thought said that the priesthood hired 3 black Nubian sorcerers who made a concussion similar to what is used in Haiti today to make someone look dead. It was given to Akhenaten at a public meeting called by the priesthood and the military. After Akhenaten drank the liquid, all of life's signs appeared to stop. As soon as the royal doctor pronounced him dead, they rushed him off to a special room where they had a sarcophagus writing. Sarcophagus. They placed him in the sarcophagus, put on the lid with a magical seal, and buried him in a hidden place. Thought said that Akhenaten had to wait inside the sarcophagus for about 200 years before a piece of the seal broke away and the magic was broken. He then returned to the halls of Amenti. This was not a problem for Akhenaten. Thought said that to an immortal being like Akhenaten, it was more like a nap. My question is, did he really know? Did he really allow this to happen to him? Akhenaten's mystery skull. Oh, I don't know if I have time to read this. It's very interesting. It's a life creation. It's a story of immortal. I will read the second part in the next video.